notion. Some of you may have heard of this avatar, now actually in popular culture. There's all these avatars. And that actually came from a Hindu idea of avatara, which is referring to certain groups of Hindus, particularly Hindus known as Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas are disciples, followers of the Hindu god Vishnu and Vishnu's various incarnations, two of which are most famous, Krishna and Rama. So in that system, it is believed that God enters into human history from time to time to intervene when things have gotten too bad and things have gotten too dark. And then the divine person, God, enters into human history to intervene. So those are called avatars, avatars of the divine. Yeah? So it comes from the same, it's the same word, to enter. So here we're not talking about some, divine power somewhere out there or somewhere up there, entering into this or that. We're talking about how we, as bodhisattvas, how do we enter into the conduct of bodhisattvas? In other words, how to engage in the conduct of bodhisattvas. So here then, the less literal translation of bodhicayavatara is the way of the bodhisattva. So there are various translations of this classic, and in fact there are various versions of this text that survive from when it was first composed in India by Shantideva. I tend to forget, Shantideva's dates. 8th century, yes. So Shantideva lived in the 8th century in northern India and was part of a famous Buddhist university known as Nalanda, monastic university, Nalanda. And so today we have in the 3 classical classical Buddhist languages, so we can speak of having 4 classical Buddhist languages across all Buddhist traditions. So you have what is known as Pali, an ancient Indian language, that the Theravada tradition records all its canonical works. It's in the Pali language. Theravada being the dominant form of Buddhism in Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and various, you could say, significant parts of Vietnam. They follow the Theravada. And so their classical Buddhist language is Pali. Then the other classical Buddhist language that is also Indic, meaning, from India, is Sanskrit, of course. And within the family of languages called Sanskrit, there are also various forms of Sanskrit. And there is what is now known as classical Sanskrit. But classical Sanskrit, by the way, isn't necessarily the oldest form of Sanskrit, isn't necessarily like the best form of Sanskrit. It's just the way, Westerners have used different terms to describe. And so classical Sanskrit is one type of Sanskrit. Then there's another type called Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. And that is the type of Sanskrit that Shantideva's Bodhisattva exists to this day, right, in Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. And that particular text is used today, as far as I know, only by Nepali Newari Buddhists in Nepal. So there is one translation into English that uses the version found in this Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. And that is the translation done by Kate Crosby, published by maybe Penguin. Kate Crosby and her husband, both of them Sanskrit scholars, they translated that. And I believe also there's another version, maybe more available, another translation of this text by Alan Wallace, together with his wife, Vesna Wallace, both of them scholars. That version is also based on the Sanskrit. And the Sanskrit version that exists today is shorter than the Tibetan version that we are using. Then the Tibetan version, being another classical Buddhist language, not Indic, but Tibetan, classical Tibetan, various translations into English exist. The one that I like to use is the one done by Padmakara Translation Group. I think maybe many of you are also using this. Then with regards to the Padmakara Translation Group, over the years, they have kind of revised their translation. So depending on the edition that you're using, there might be here and there some different phrasings. There is this version by the Padmakara Translation Group. Several. Then the fourth classical Buddhist language is classical Buddhist Chinese. And classical Buddhist Chinese is the way that the Buddhist scriptures are recorded and used by Buddhists not only in China, but also in Japan, Korea, and significant parts of Vietnam. So for example, Plum Village, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, their source is this Chinese classical Buddhist canon. And so the Koreans, the Japanese, Chinese, Taiwanese Buddhists, they use that. As far as I know, no one has translated the Bodhisattva that is found in the Chinese canon. And Bodhisattva is not found in the Pali sources. So Theravada Buddhism doesn't have this text. And of course, there's a reason to that. Basically, this is what we call a Mahayana text. So Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Tibetan, Mongolian, Bhutanese, Nepali, all these various regional forms of Buddhism, they all identify as Mahayana, followers of what's known as the Mahayana or the Great Vehicle. Vajrayana being a further division within Mahayana. And so the other Buddhist tradition, great Buddhist tradition, other than the Mahayana family, is Theravada. And Theravada do not have this text. So therefore, there isn't any Pali version of the Bodhisattva. So this is just a little bit of contextualizing and kind of part of, as most of you know, I like to try to give some broader kind of education and some awareness of how to place these things within the world that we live in now. There was a time where all these various Buddhist cultures had minimal contact with each other. And therefore, I feel maybe no need to know so much back then about each other necessarily. But now in the world that we live in, where we are exposed to all different forms and types of Buddhism, and beyond Buddhism, all sorts of things, all sorts of traditions, all sorts of spiritual modalities, so to say, or religions, or all of that, then I think it's helpful to know a little bit for us to be able to place what we are looking at within a context. Something to be said about approaching spiritual writings, spiritual texts in a trans-historical way, of course, in that they are timeless, their message. But it can be tricky, knowing what parts of the text is intended to be timeless and what parts are time-bound, right? So in that sense, I think knowing the context really helps, right? Then the expression I like to use when I was teaching in college is like, what is the take-home lesson here? Right? What is the take-home lesson here? And to know the take-home lesson, I think knowing context helps, contextualizing. And so that we're not continuously just like reading it like, the words that we see being used there is how those words are intended in the original context of 8th century. And then we're reading now, right, in 21st century in Arkansas, in, North Carolina, and, wherever else you have lived and whatever else you have absorbed, You read the text as if, it was composed, in Little Rock. Then we might actually be spending a lot of time coming to perhaps unintended, I won't say wrong, but unintended conclusions, unintended take-home lessons. Unintended is a little bit more neutral. Sometimes it's just wrong. And we should not be shy, or we, as in I'm talking about myself, and those who have the role as Buddhist teachers, I think should not be shy to be able to say, no, that's wrong. Sometimes in an effort not to trigger people who have, lots of baggage with, lots of religious baggage, Buddhist teachers go overboard in, not saying, no, that's wrong. Knowing full and well, so many of us are recovering, not alcoholics, but, well, that possibly, but recovering from religion, In fact, I think there is a loosely organized group called Religious Anonymous for recovering religious people. And that's good because, for sure, religion has its own baggage, causing its own set of traumas. So know thyself, and then know the context of what we are reading, and then we will come, I think, to a better understanding. Increasingly, I feel I have to say to people who come to Dharma centers, come to Buddhist centers, come to Buddhist teachings, like first of all, do you think you need a therapist? If you need a therapist, please go find one that will work for you. Work for you meaning, right? Actually helping you, not enabling you, but helping you. That kind of work is really necessary, I think. Otherwise, you come to Dharma thinking the Dharma center or the Dharma teacher or the meditation that you're learning is a substitute for the therapy that you need. I'm afraid that more often than not, Dharma can be perverted. Not that you're perverse, but the underlying kind of acute, injury is distorting what the Dharma is saying and what the Dharma is intended for. In the short term, it may seem to work, but often what's just working there is you have found a group of people that you like and that you like to be identified along with. A group of people, a particular style, a particular intellectual place, that matches, your expectation for yourself. But that's not yet Dharma transforming our lives, That's not yet Dharma transforming our lives. So we come to the Buddha Dharma, Buddha's teachings. We come to the Buddha Dharma, no doubt, I think, because we feel that something is not right, Something is not right. But as to exactly what is not right, it's hard to kind of. Sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. But often it's not so specific, like something is not right. So I'm looking for answers. Yeah. And that's how we all came to Buddha Dharma. I mean, of course, myself, a little different, I grew up in a Buddhist culture. But even that, at some point I made a decision and said, I'm going to, pursue this. Circumstances a little different, but not that different. Yeah, so anyway, to preface all of this and a reminder, we're at the beginning of a new cycle, this new year. I would say, please, give therapy a chance. Then come to the Dharma and see, what the Dharma has to offer. And I think some of you who have heard me said this before are probably like, oh yeah, you've said this before. But it's a good reminder, I think, for you, for me, that you come to the Dharma because the Dharma has given you answers to questions that you have been asking. That obviously is a good thing. But that is not yet it. This it, Have I arrived at it? You need to go further than that. Not just that the Dharma has now given me the answers that I'm looking for. But because of the Buddha Dharma, I am now also asking questions I have not asked before. Or at least it's reframing those questions that I was asking before. Because often that's the deeper level work. Because we all come with our set of assumptions of what is wrong. And so then correspondingly, we ask questions based on that. But the Buddha's central point, is we are afflicted by basic ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance with regards to what is dukkha, what is suffering. And ignorance with regards to the fact that suffering has a cause. We may come to the Dharma because we feel that something is off. Another way of putting it, according to the language of the Buddhist text, is like we experience suffering. But our experience of suffering is often very fuzzy. I'm not saying, not strong. It's strong, but it's fuzzy. Because sometimes, precisely because it's so strong, it makes you not able to see exactly what it is. And so in that state of fuzziness, we ask certain questions. And that the Buddha Dharma has provided answers that is satisfying enough for us to go, I'm going to give this a chance. I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to sign up for some classes. I'm going to attend some programs. Great, very good. But also know that you also want to pay attention to, am I starting to ask different questions now that I understand the Buddha's teachings a little bit more now? Have I started to reframe my questions? Kind of like the proverbial question of, have you stopped beating your wife? It's like, it's good if you, now, like previously I have not, but now I have stopped. Yes, very good. But maybe that's not the real question to ask. And so by engaging the Dharma, we begin to have insights and understanding that will begin to change the questions that we're asking. We begin by a fear and an intolerance of suffering. That's necessary. But at a certain point, if we are going to be free from suffering, we have to stop fearing suffering. Not we have to go look around for more suffering. No, we have to stop fearing suffering the way that we fear it at the beginning. And then we begin to kind of have a different relationship with suffering. Not, it's also not true. Sometimes in order to make the Buddhist teachings more relevant to people or more realistic for some people, we present the Dharma as if it's just a form of like soothing your pain and then you live with, it. You make do with the pain, No, actually the Buddha says there is an end. It can be stopped completely. Dukkha, suffering. Not just making the best out of situations. Yeah, there is the promise of an end to it. Now, how quickly that end can happen, how stable can that end be experienced? Yeah, those are, those will take time. But whether long or short time, the Buddha did say, no, there is an end to suffering. And he himself achieved that end. And he is inviting us to arrive at that end too. And one of the most cherished manual for getting to that end is this Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. Then, specific to this context of Shantideva, remember that he initially taught this or recited this. It said that he gave an impromptu presentation. To whom? To, who was his audience? Not the general public. To his fellow students, to his fellow monastics at this, greatest Buddhist university, kind of the Cambridge or Oxford of ancient India. So to an audience that was highly educated. So if there are things in here, that don't immediately, make sense, do understand, he was addressing a very educated audience. He knew certain assumptions that his audience already have. And so he doesn't need to go address those things. But that might be missing from our context. Right? So keep that in mind as you read this text. So I believe you have completed chapter 1 and 2, yeah? And at the start of 3.
Yes, that's right.
So the first 3 chapters, if you look at the table of contents, the excellence of bodhicitta, confession, and taking hold of bodhicitta, these 3 chapters, chapter 1 begins by discussing what is bodhicitta and what are the qualities, the good qualities pertaining to bodhicitta. Like, in other words, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Yeah. And there also Shantideva lays out the structure of this text, but also the structure of the path to awakening, to Buddhahood. Path is just a poetic term for process, the process of waking up. The process of waking up is here presented as the actualization of bodhicitta. Right? Bodhicitta, literally, bodhi is awakened or awakening, or enlightenment or enlightening. And chitta is heart mind, chitta. So the awakened mind, the awakening mind. What makes Buddhas Buddhas is that Buddhas are sentient beings like you and me, for whom bodhicitta has been actualized. The awakened heart, the awakened mind has been achieved. That's what transforms a sentient being into a Buddha. That is when someone has awakened his or her mind, has awakened mind, has awakened heart. To arrive at that, we need to cultivate the awakening mind, also bodhicitta. And here in chapter 1, Shantideva says, there are two aspects to this awakening mind. There is the aspiration and there is the action. And these two always have to go hand in hand. That desire, that aspiration, that determination, that vow needs to be strengthened, reinforced again and again and again and again and again, all the way till you arrive at the destination. But that aspiration needs to also be complemented by the appropriate conduct. So the inner and the outer. The conduct is the things that we say, the things that we do that matches the intention, that matches the mind, the heart, the determination, the resolve, the vow to become awake for not just your own purposes, but also for the purposes of others' happiness. In a nutshell, that is what bodhicitta is. The resolve in terms of bodhicitta as the awakening mind rather than bodhicitta as the awakened mind. Shantideva doesn't say much about bodhicitta as the awakened mind. Sometimes that's called ultimate bodhicitta. Here he treats mostly what we call conventional bodhicitta. But conventional doesn't mean like, less real. Here conventional means, the awakening mind, the process that is necessary to arrive at the destination. So for this process, you have to pay attention to the aspiration, and you have to make sure that your conduct matches your inner aspiration. And so that's aspiration bodhicitta and action bodhicitta. Here, let's see. I already forgot the vocabulary that he uses. Verse 15 of the first chapter. Bodhicitta, the awakened mind. I would change this to the awakening mind. Not yet there, right? And bodhicitta, the awakening mind, is known in brief to have two aspects. First, aspiring bodhicitta in intention. Then active bodhicitta, practical engagement. That's how Bhamakara has translated it. Then to elaborate, right? Shantideva says, as corresponding to the wish to go and then to setting out. That these two have to go hand in hand, that just aspiring or having the intention is not enough, is highlighted in 17. From bodhicitta in intention, great results arise for those still turning in the wheel of life. So here, the first two lines is saying, even if, our actions cannot match our intention yet, just having this intention can have such a powerful impact on us. The first two lines of 17 is saying, don't give up hope. Don't be carried away by the frustrations that you feel right now. Because even as we are still turning in this wheel of, I also don't like wheel of life here, maybe more like wheel of becoming. There's a nuance there. At least the way we use the word life, right? You and me, life is good. So then here you say, oh, you mean turning in the wheel of life is bad? Am I supposed to walk around feeling like life is bad? No. So if you don't find yourself walking around, with the longest faces, don't worry, that doesn't make you a bad Buddhist. Here it's talking about not just life as you and I tend to think and use the word life. And here it's talking about an unhappy life. A life that is marked by unsatisfactoriness, by dukkha, by suffering. Which means a life driven by confusion and the mental defilements. So technically it's called bhava. Bhava is becoming. Becoming carries the connotation of never arriving, always on the move, always becoming. I said this is further. This point, can be seen in a lot of variations of this bumper sticker. We have a lot of vehicles in Asheville with lots of bumper stickers. Maybe Little Rock has less, but certain neighborhoods in Little Rock probably has them. These bumper stickers that say, I would rather be ... golfing, hunting, and then reading, Doesn't matter actually whether hunting, well, on another level, it matters whether it's hunting or fishing or reading. Yes, but in this context, it doesn't matter. More basic problem is the notion of I would rather, right? That means you're not attending to the reality of this moment. In fact, maybe you don't want to attend to that and you want to be distracted from that, right? So that is what becoming is referring to. Living lives where we would rather than attending to what is. I would rather. That's the becoming. But here, 17 is saying, even if we're still turning in this wheel of becoming, if we have bodhicitta in intention, great results can arise. It makes a difference. In fact, it makes a big difference. But the next two lines says, yet merit does not rise from it in ceaseless streams unless there is also active bodhicitta. Unless practical engagement is involved. Until and unless the intention also translates to manifest as conduct. For when For when with irreversible intent the mind embraces bodhicitta, willing to set free the endless multitudes of beings. Ah, that is the definition of bodhicitta. Willingness to set free the endless multitudes of beings. That is the reason why we want to become awake, why we want to become Buddha. Not so people will start making statues of us, big and small, and have them in their homes and their parks and their temples, but solely for the reason of having the ability to set free the endless multitudes of beings. For when with irreversible intent, this mind of ours embraces bodhicitta, which is the willingness to set free the endless multitudes of beings, in that instant, from that moment on, 19, a great and unremitting stream, a strength of wholesome merit, even during sleep and in attention, rises equal to the vastness of the sky. Even during sleep and inattention. Wow. See, there's a context to this. The broader context to this sleep and inattention, elsewhere in the Buddhist teachings, they warn against the uselessness of sleep and inattention. Okay, footnote. Getting a good night's sleep is so important. We're not dissing that, but we are talking about this super spiritual athletes, for the super spiritual athletes, right? Which is Shantideva's like intended audience, original intended audience. Then don't sleep so much. Because sleep, is useless. Equated with inattention. Yeah. But then you and me, getting a good night's sleep is important. Don't think, oh, I'm Buddhist now, I should sleep less. It might ruin your health. And then when your health is ruined, very hard to meditate. Very hard to be nice and kind to people around you, if you're always irritable. But here, here's the thing. So generally, for Shantideva's audience, sleep and inattention are considered, a waste of time. But here it says, however, when this intention to become Buddha becomes irreversible in you, then even in something as wasteful as sleep and inattention, endless stream of merit continues to flow. Yeah, so when they first heard this from Shantideva, they're like, wow. Wow. The rest of the chapter, Shantideva keeps inspiring them. Wow. 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 To uplift them, to inspire them, to give rise to this intent. And for that purpose, there is a ceremony to support that arising of that intent. And that is the ceremony that is described in chapter 2 and 3. Chapter 2 translated as confession. Chapter 3, so confession, or what is translated here as confession, is the prerequisite for taking up for taking this vow. So the ceremony proper is described in chapter 3. Then chapter 2, yeah, is, think of it as what is going on in chapter 2 actually is not just quote unquote confession, it's also making offerings. So all the preparatory, sometimes called the preliminaries, all the supporting conditions that are necessary to make the ceremony described in 3 to have full effect. The act of confession, again, the act of confession starts on verse 28 in chapter 2. The part where quote unquote confession. Before that, from 1 to 27, it's making offerings. Both imagined as well as actually doing your best to actually lay out these offerings. Bring all the desirable things, the precious things, the enjoyable things, and offer them to the awakened beings, to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, from which we will receive this vow. From 1 to 27, and then 28 to the rest of this chapter, and 28 onwards is where the title of this chapter came from, confession. Now, confession is not my preferred word for what is going on from 28 to 65. Because, again, there is baggage, right? With confession. All you recovering Catholics. Then beyond being recovering Catholics, there's this notion of confession. Confess your sins so that God can forgive your sins, you sinful person. You inherently evil, sinful type. Confess your sins and accept the gift of salvation, right? So all of that baggage. So confession is actually not a good translation. I love what Pammakara Translation Group is doing, really. I'm not saying this to criticize, but to give us a deeper understanding of what is that word, right? The word in Tibetan that is translated as confession, or frequently translated in confession, literally it's to lay aside. How interesting. To lay aside. In another phrase, it's to expose and put aside, in a more detailed. It's a compound of consisting of expose, and expose there, the connotation is it has been previously hidden away, either deliberately hidden away or unintentionally concealed so that we cannot see. Now we need to expose. Or we need to uncover so that we can see the problem in plain sight. So this already describes, gives us insight into how the Buddha explained what the problem is. We hide away. We push away the causes of suffering. We don't stop creating them. We create them, we hide them. We hide them away. And sometimes we also hide the suffering. As in, we take painkillers. There is the taking of painkillers so that the pain is not so overwhelming and will create a space for you to attend to the problem at hand. That's a good reason to take painkillers. I think that's the difference between, right, taking painkillers to help manage and taking painkillers to distract yourself. And that's when painkillers are abused. Right? There's that difference. So here we're talking about no longer kidding ourselves, no longer hiding it away, both suffering and the causes of suffering, we expose. Not exposing other people's stuff, okay? Our own. We expose, we admit, we own up. Yeah, we own up. See, if we don't understand how this is supposed to work, we can even turn Buddhist teachings into another way to hide, another way to kind of ignore. Some of you may know I just started this series every Thursday night on karma. If your Thursday nights are free, I encourage you to join the series. It's free, New York time, meaning 1 hour ahead of you guys from 7:30 to 9. But even if that time slot doesn't work for you, if you sign up for it, every time we have a class posted, you'll get an email saying, hey, this class is now available for you to watch. It's free to participate. Somebody who has information on how to sign up, maybe you can share on the Zoom chat. Anyway, this is talking about the Buddhist teachings on karma. So one example how we, if we don't understand and don't get it, how the Buddhist teachings are supposed to work, then even Buddhist teachings can enable, the brokenness that we're trying to heal from. So for example, we might say, when something has gone wrong, and then instead of looking more directly or looking more closely to how our response or our action of body, speech, and mind now, we go into this mode of like, oh, must be the ripening of past negative karma. Oh, must be something I did in my last life. And it could be true. But that should not be the first kind of answer you provide for why am I miserable now? It should not be, oh, something I did in the past. Must be my bad karma. And that thing, must be by my bad karma. If you have hung out enough among, spiritual types, alternative spiritual types, right? Or Buddhist centers even, whenever somebody says, oh, must be my bad karma, it's like a Buddhist version of, oh, bless her heart, which is not really blessing anyone, right? It's simply grudgingly, you try to say something nice. Oh, must be my bad karma. In fact, what you want to say is, it's your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault. Passive aggressively, in Buddhist circles, we declare to the people around us, oh, must be my bad karma that I wasn't invited to the tea thing that you guys did last week. When in fact, what we want to say is, you guys left me out. And instead of looking into, well, why? Yeah, right? I mean, probably they didn't leave you out. They didn't call a meeting beforehand to plan how to leave you out. Probably that didn't happen, But nonetheless, yes, But if there is a pattern of you being left out, again, like look at what is going on, right? With your own body, speech, and mind. We're not talking about do you have a right or do you not have a right to confront people who may or may not be deliberately or not deliberately leaving you out. There's a time and a place for those kinds of things, right? And sometimes, yes, communities of people, whether Dharma centers or spiritual groups, can develop a certain kind of dysfunctionality that is, kind of like you could say systemic, and that can and should be addressed by organizations. I'm an advocate for that. But we should not think that it's either or, Because if we think that it's only that, then a big part of the Buddha, what the Buddha has to tell us, we have missed. Which is even when the world conspire against you, and Shantideva will talk about this, you still have agency to turn things around. Karma is about agency. Buddha's teachings about karma, which is at the foundation of this entire book, is the importance of agency, meaning we can all move things, shift things, change things. Maybe not at the pace that we want. Let's also not forget that. This is not some kind of, popular psychology, or, born again, Buddhism, yes, I've been saved by Buddha, and everything will change tomorrow. No, it doesn't happen so quickly like this. But nonetheless, Buddha says, all happiness and suffering comes from our own doing. Footnote, this is not about blame. Don't blame other people, for sure. Also, don't blame yourself. It's not about blame. Why is it not about blame? Because at the heart of this tradition, we say, we are all innately Buddhas. Blaming is based on the idea that there is something sinister in you, in me. You know? The act of blame comes from there. Like deep down, somewhere in you or me, yeah, is a sinister spirit or attitude to want to cause harm. But this completely does not exist in this system. On the contrary, it says we are innately Buddhas. So there's no place for blame, even blaming yourself. To diagnose that there is a problem is very different from looking for someone to assign blame, whether others or yourself. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah, maybe not immediately, maybe it won't make immediate sense, but try to, kind of let it percolate a little. And there is a difference between saying there is a set of conditions that are now here that results in the experience of suffering for self and probably for others. There's that, and there is looking for someone to assign blame, whether others or yourself. Yeah? These are two different things. Buddha taught this, but not this. Looking for someone to assign blame. So this confession, this exposing, then there's a second part to it. Laying it aside, putting it down. That says, enough. Enough now. No more. This actually is a form of offering. Isn't it interesting? I think chapter 2 can also be titled differently. If I can get in the time machine and go look for Shantideva, I would say, hey Shantideva, should we call this chapter offering? Because this exposing and laying aside is a different kind of offering, in which both types of offerings, the first 28 or 27 verses of chapter 2, the making of offerings, right? And it describes even like, beautiful, like spa, basically. There's one part is describing a spa. Pools of water and sandalwood paste and, bathing the Buddhas and then, drying their bodies with this wonderful robes and then giving them clothing and food and music. This is like checking into a spa. Yeah? And having a real nice vacation. Yeah? So this is an offering. It's quite obvious. But can you see that actually from 28 on to the 65, it's actually an offering? Because in both types of offerings, it's about giving up. Giving up. then when you give in these two ways, what happens? Space opens up. Space opens up. And this space is necessary in order for bodhicitta to come in. If we have only this much space, then only this much bodhicitta can turn up when we do the ceremony in chapter 3. When we have this much space, this much bodhicitta can turn up. When we have boundless space, boundlessness of bodhicitta, that's Buddhahood. So in a way, all the successive chapters here, which actually, starting from chapter 4, it pertains to active engagement of bodhicitta. All those can be understood as the unfolding of this space, and within this space, the awakening mind grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger through conduct. Questions, comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
I think I still have a question about like one of the very first things that you said today, which was the difference between um, following a Buddhist path and Buddhist study and Buddhist practice and therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you were laying out so beautifully the first couple chapters, right, of Shantideva, you were mentioning about solving problems and about how, you know, we can identify what the problem is, and it's different from figuring out who is to blame for it, etc. But when you talk about solving problems, my mind goes to therapy.
It's a different set of problems. And therapy is the acute bleeding that needs to be attended to first.
Okay.
Buddha Dharma solves the chronic. Yeah. In traditional Buddhist societies, both the chronic and the acute was handled by Buddhist experts, the local village lamas and all of that. And their therapy, I would say, happened in the form of ritual therapy. So it worked differently. But same purpose. Now, even in Asia, in traditional Buddhist cultures, because, I mean, cultures change, you know? With kind of modern and contemporary, well, modern is kind of an empty idea, but contemporary, right? With contemporary cultures that are bleeding into each other, much of Asia is also going in the direction that we are going. Like it or not, too bad, too late, you know? So the way that we conceive of problems, the way we construct dissatisfactoriness, the way they do it is very similar to us, you know. And ritual, you can see it in ritual demand in many monasteries have decreased. I heard the head of our order says, you know, in Ladakh, you know, like basically about 50% it has decreased. Oh, of course, there's many factors to why it's decreased, but definitely one of them is, well, one of it, the big part is one of it is people don't have time. Because this kind of therapy involves, a lot of time and resources. So one hand is people don't have time. And then of course that's the chicken and the egg. Well, why don't people have time? I mean, all of human history, all of history of the world, everything, time wasn't more then and less now, right? 24 hours, 7 days has remained constant, right? But we are putting priorities differently now. And when we prioritize differently, then we begin to kind of grow different types of demons that needs to be dealt with differently. That's the acute stuff. So even Asia now, I think, people may start to need therapy the way we are talking about therapy. Because the causes and conditions that are giving rise to contemporary challenges and problems are very much the same there and here. Suffering has always been the same. But how it gets constructed, that changes. And that differs from culture to culture. But now, with the internet and everything, cultures in some ways are being flattened. Yeah.
Dr. Lye, you mentioned not blaming each other and not blaming ourselves,
Yes.
which I thought was very interesting. But it comes to my mind that it's important not to blame karma either, but to simply understand its
Yes.
cause and effect.
Yes. Or use karma as an excuse, like, or karma the way we tend to think of, oh, last life, oh, or even last year or last century or last quarter of a century, when my babysitter, dropped me on my head, or when my mom sent me to the babysitter, all of that, right? Not blame, but not blaming also need not translate to not seeing how that created a particular kind of a particular programming that has continued to program us now. It's not blaming in that we're not saying it's their fault or my fault, but seeing it as unintended consequences of, in Buddhist language, inauspicious interdependence.
I also want to thank you about your discussion on chapter 2. That was very, very helpful.
Oh, good. Yes. Yeah. See your confession as achieving the same results as the offering.
Yeah, from my perspective, I totally did not get that. So it was very helpful.
Yeah, but because I think the word confession is there, mea culpa, like, oh, whip, whip, whip.
Yeah, when we were in the middle of chapter 2, confession, I remember there was a lot of discussion about the term evil.
Uh-huh.
Like just exactly what did it mean in this context?
Yes, yes. That has to do with if you are able to find uh, there is a podcast somewhere. If I'm able to find that, I will share with you guys. In fact, I'm kind of looking at it now to see if I can find it. If you're able to find, there was an interview done with the main translators of the Bodhisattva by the Padmakara. But Padmakara is a group of people, and not everyone in the group is involved in the in everything that they translate. But there's one person in particular who is like the main translator of the Bodhisattva for Padmakara. And that interview is helpful, I think, to understand the choices of the terms here, like confession, evil, Basically, it's an ex-Benedictine monk, yeah, who translated this, but who has also done like, 2 sets of like 3-year retreat. And so it's not like he's not educated in Buddhism. And he gives very good reasons for why he chose evil, why I think he even maybe uses the word sin and confession.
Is that like a Lion's Roar podcast or Tricycle or something like that?
It's either, I want to say it's either in the Shambhala Publications website, where they sometimes do these like interviews with authors, or Wisdom Podcast, Wisdom Publications. Somewhere like that. I think if you Google, Padmakara Translation Group, interview Shantideva, you may pull something up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. A totally unrelated question. I'm bad with names in general, and then increasingly bad with names. What Leah, I think, used to be from
Oh,
Little Rock. She and her husband moved to North Carolina.
Oh, Leah Charlton?
Leah, yeah, that was
Uh-huh.
having some health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was quite serious, I think, at one point, like several months back.
Mhm.
But she and her husband came to the Karma series on last Thursday, and she looked fantastic. So I think she's on demand. Just want to update you in case you have not heard from her.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And they have moved to Spruce Pine, which was Hurricane Central, right before it came, but they were okay.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's right next to Penland.
Yeah, yeah. Up there was really, I don't know how Penland fared. Have you heard, Melissa?
I just got an email from them that they're reopening for 2025.
Okay. It was unbelievable. I went up there a few days ago to go see our land. Oh, it was just heartbreaking. Um, till now, I mean, around Asheville, you still see and debris from the hurricane, like the all those areas along rivers and creeks, all the debris, the destruction, you can still see around Asheville. But once you leave Asheville and you go north towards like Spruce Pine, Burnsville, and all of that, oh, it's just everywhere. Homes and lives that have been destroyed, like all along the river, this river called Tow River to get to our land. Roads are destroyed.
I wondered about that
Yeah.
since driving up there when I visited. I wondered if you could even get to the land, but then when I saw the statues got to the land, I
Yes.
figured that there's enough work.
Yeah, we had to go alternate ways. But along Tow, so you have driven past there. Along Tow, sections of that road are gone.
Yeah, I figured they were.
Yeah. And yeah, lives and buildings went down the river. And so I went up there. On the way back, we decided to go the old way and to try to go as far as we can, just to get an idea, And because we were in this truck that was, good, we were able to pass, but there were sections of the road that was closed. I mean, there was local people going through, and so we went through. But both, the project manager, Bill, and myself, we both agreed that the next few times that we go, we're going to avoid that stretch. Not so much that, that physically it's not possible, but we both felt that we were intruding.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though we were just trying to get to our land, it felt that it was so intrusive. And so we're like, let's not drive through here. Yeah, but the land is fine.
Oh, good.
Uh,
We
What's the name of the venerable that lived close to the land?
Venerable George.
How did he fare?
He's fine. Everything is fine on his property.
Oh, good.
But around surrounding was difficult, and so like our land, we had put the building down right before this, and right above the building is this white pine grove of over an acre. And when this was happening, I was thinking it's gone, the building, because white pines are tall and they fall easily. And indeed, that whole acre of pine grove was destroyed. But every single tree, every single branch that fell in the opposite direction of the building. Yeah, I mean, we were really fortunate that not a branch even fell on that building.
That's miraculous.
Yeah. And so now our neighbor is cleaning up the mess. We're paying him. And he has a friend who just came out from the West to hang out with him and is a certified logger. So the friend is logging and he is milling. And so we're going to get like 7,000 square footage of like pine
Oh, wow.
that we're going to use for the inside of the Dharma hall, the paneling.
Oh.
Yeah. And they're doing it for like half the price that we got quoted by other people.
Right?
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sure you all have to go now. I have to go, and good to
It's
see.
so good to see you.
Yeah, good to see everyone.
Thank you so
Please,
much. It is good.
yeah, have a good start of the year, and may your interest in the Dharma turn into benefit for you and others around you. And I think next Sunday I should be able to join. Part of my Sunday challenge is there is a practice at the center right before this. Sure, if I, get my act together, I can do both things. They're not happening at the same time, but it's just back to back. Then frequently I find myself like feeling that I can only do one and not the other. So this morning I did not go to the program at the center, using you guys as an excuse. And then when I
Well,
can't,
we're glad to be your excuse.
then when I cannot join you, I use you as I use them as an excuse. Oh, I have to
Yeah.
go there. The reality is like they're not happening all at the same time, but it's just they're back to back, and then I can't get myself organized enough to do both. And then what I have is after this, I have another thing, which is my weekly family thing with my God family. And so these three I play sometimes against each other. When I cannot, get organized enough, I blame. Yeah? Blame. But
Okay.
thankfully, all three are so generous in not, accepting the blame of the others and say, "Oh, it's okay, it's okay." So I'm grateful for all three of what I have to do on Sunday, being generous and understanding. So thank you so much, and okay, I'll see you all hopefully next Sunday. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Melissa, and the group. Yes.